What is the future of religion? What awaits us, let's say in 50 or 100 years from now? How influential will religion be in our world? In this review, we discuss the results of arguably the largest study available on religion. It took 40 years and covered more than 100 countries containing over 90% of the world's population. In his last book, Religion's Sudden Decline, What's Causing It and What Comes Next, Ronald Inglehart argues that secularization recently accelerated. And this is the main claim of the study, that our world is becoming less religious. If we look at today's world, the number of people who renounce religion is historically unprecedented. Never ever in human history have we had societies or countries where more than half of the inhabitants claim to be non-religious. Just take a look at Estonia, the Czech Republic, Japan, South Korea, and it's not just about non-religious behavior. Hundreds of millions of people are refusing to believe in anything supernatural. Plus, which is also very important, again and again many studies confirm that even among those who consider themselves religious and attend churches, synagogues, mosques and temples, they do so often for cultural reasons. Many of them do not have a personal belief in supernatural forces. And the world is full of such people, something that has never happened before in the known history of mankind. Yes, they are not anti-religious activists. Most non-religious people are simply indifferent to religion. They simply don't think and don't care about it. Inglehart argues that between 1981 and 2007, most countries became more, not less religious. Therefore, a counter-argument against the secularization thesis was justified. And here I should explain that the secularization theory expresses the idea that religion would gradually fade in importance and cease to be significant with the advent of industrial society. Advances in science and technology will lead to rationalization and modernization. As a result of this societal progress, religious authority will decline. Many prominent thinkers of the 19th century, such as Comte, Durkheim, Marx, Weber, and Freud, believed in that. Also, many scholars from 1950s to 1980s were convinced that the modernization process would lead to the decline in religion. Today, however, many claim that at the moment secularization thesis on the global scale has been proved wrong. Religion is growing rapidly around the world despite modernization, technology, internet, social media, and so on. So why did Inglehart make such a controversial claim then? He states that if we focus on the recent data from 2007 to 2020, then the overwhelming majority of 49 countries that were re-examined in 2020 became less religious. Of the 49 countries, only 6 showed net gain in religiosity since 2007, 1 showed no significant change, and the publics of 42 countries had become less religious from 2007 to 2020. This is an intriguing and even controversial statistic, don't you agree? Therefore, there are many debates among experts on secularization on how to interpret them. Moreover, Inglehart, relying on Voas and Chavez and his data, claims that the United States can no longer be cited as the counterexample that disproves the secularization thesis. For more details, please see this section of the book, The United States, the case that used to disprove the secularization thesis. And it's true, many scholars previously and now were pointing to the United States and saying, don't you see that America is a highly industrial country, but also it's highly religious society? But Inglehart claims that in the last 14 years, the US has been secularizing more rapidly than any other countries for which they had data. Its level has fallen substantially by virtually every measure of religiosity, and by one widely recognized criterion, it now ranks as the 12th least religious country in the world. He writes, thus, in the earliest US survey in 1982, 52% of the American public say that God was very important in their lives. In 2017, only 23% made this choice. In 1982, 83% of Americans described themselves as a religious person. In 2017, only 55% did so. These findings support Voice and Chavez's claim that the United States can no longer be cited as the counterexample that disproves the secularization thesis. Focusing on trends rather than levels, they demonstrate that American religiosity has been declining for decades. Inglehart also reminds that we should not put too much emphasis on the cognitive factor, because very often scholars stress the importance of the growth of scientific knowledge and modernization or rationalization for secularization to happen. But this is not always the case. The emotional factor also has a significant impact. That is, people do not necessarily have to become more educated in order to abandon religion. Sometimes a sense of security, stability, and the ability to be more independent in their choice is enough. And here I'd like to remind you that Inglehart is a co-author of Sacred and Secular, where he, along with Pippa Norris, put forward the theory of existential security, which implies that societies where people feel secure have a low level of demand for religion. Inglehart believes that it is not correct to attribute secularization to the progress of scientific knowledge or modernization in general. After all, this implies that secularization is a universal and unidirectional process, but the theory of evolutionary modernization, which Inglehart is now putting forward, holds that secularization merely reflects an increase in security. In some part of the planet, it may arise and then religion will decline. But as soon as the feeling of security disappears, religiosity may return again. In this recent book, however, Inglehart connects the process of secularization also to the shift from pro-fertility norms to individual choice norms. He claims that individual choice norms have made a transition from minority to majority status in many high-income countries, bringing rapidly increasing secularization. According to his findings, today countries whose public emphasize pro-fertility norms tend to be strongly religious, while countries whose public emphasize individual choice norms are much less religious. At the same time, the rapid erosion of pro-fertility norms is not the only factor driving secularization. For example, he shares next few reasons. Here's the main hypothesis of the book. Our theory implies that in societies where religion remains strong, little or no change in pro-fertility norms will take place. In societies where religiosity is growing, we will find growing support for pro-fertility norms. And in societies where support for pro-fertility norms is rapidly giving way to individual choice norms, we will find declining religiosity. And here Inglehart brings a ton of statistics to show that today, especially in prosperous societies with strong and stable economies, individual choice norms are encouraged. That is, people become more independent, especially women. Couples marry later, children are also born later and not so many. It turns out that secularization leads to a decline in the birth rate, while religiosity increases the birth rate. As a result, we see polarization, where secular societies become even more secularized and religious societies become even more religious. In the 8th chapter, What Replaces Religion, Inglehart shares what he thinks will happen in the future. Will the world be more like America or more like Scandinavia? But before we discuss that, I want to make sure I turn a bit to the chapter 2, where Inglehart, after hinting at the possible decline of religion in the future, is trying to give some credit to religion. He states that throughout history, religion has played a crucial role in shaping civilizations and helping us to survive. He writes that evolutionary modernization theory, which he now advocates, does not imply that religion is the product of ignorance and the opium of the people. Almost nothing in history has been as universal and enduring as religion, and it is likely that it has contributed to our survival. One reason religion spread and endured was because it encouraged norms of sharing, which were crucial to survival in an environment where there was no social security system. In bad times, one's survival might depend on how strongly these norms were inculcated in the people around you. Inglehart talks about biologists such as David Sloan Wilson and Edward Wilson, and the idea that natural selection can take place not only at the individual but also at the group level, and that religion influences this. Perhaps it helped more cohesive groups survive in natural selection. Inglehart adds that until recently, natural selection helped impose pro-fertility norms, but a growing number of societies have attained high existential security, long life expectancy, and low infant mortality, making pro-fertility norms no longer necessary for societal survival, and opening the way to a shift to individual choice norms. Inglehart also points that while religions sometimes justify violence, it also helps to prevent violence. Plus, it has helped us throughout history to cope with stress in situations of instability. When people faced hunger, violence, or disease, religion assured people that the future was in the hands of omniscient and omnipotent gods. Such faith gave them the courage to deal with threats instead of falling into despair. And if we think about it, perhaps our ancestors could have found some alternative ways to deal with threats. But as we see from history, this function in most cases was taken by religion. Therefore, according to Inglehart, it is probably religion that increased our chances of survival. He also refers to the work of Jared Diamond, who reminds that many evolutionary biologists believe that religion is a byproduct of features of human brain that originally served other functions. Often it was under the influence of strong emotions, and so we learned to predict the events around us and developed intuition. And thanks to this development of our brain, a byproduct was formed in the form of religious thinking. That is, religious beliefs arose from a set of cognitive dispositions that originally developed to perform completely different non-religious functions. Many cognitive researchers of religion, such as Pascal Boyer or Aaron Aranzayan, support a similar explanation. In general, Inglehart recalls that Diamond believes that religion itself has served 7 different functions in the course of human history, and that the importance of given functions vary at different phases of development, from being extremely important to being entirely absent. These functions are supernatural explanation, diffusing anxiety through ritual, providing comfort about pain and death, standard organization, preaching political obedience, moral code of behavior towards strangers, and justification of wars. So, according to Diamond's forecast, if in the next 30 years living standards continue to rise throughout the world, function 1 and function 4 through 7 will continue to decline. They will either disappear or be replaced by other institutions in prosperous societies, but functions 2 and 3, diffusing anxiety and providing comfort about pain and death, will continue to persist. Plus, Inglehart reminds that a firm belief system contributes to mental and physical well-being, but he admits that the belief system need not be religious. Although historically religion has been the most pervasive option, other belief systems can also fill this function. So let me stop for a while and recap. On one hand, Inglehart believes that religion in many ways has played a positive role in human evolutionary development. At the same time, many functions that religion has played during history could be replaced by other institutions. According to Talcott Parsons, religion is declining due to the Industrial Revolution and the industrialization of society. Before that, the church did a great number of different roles or functions for people. It provided free education, free food for many people in need, especially during hard times. But today, when governments take more responsibility in that regard, the role of religion in many developed places narrowed down solely to spiritual guidance and spiritual matters. The church is no longer as influential as it was in many sectors of society. Correspondingly, Aaron Aranzayan, looking from the perspective of cognitive science, concludes that in the past, religious institutions helped to support large-scale cooperation and other important functions, but we have come to a point where we have replaced religion with secular institutions. This is an interesting idea because it says that secularization is not in contrast or conflict to religion. It's actually derived from religion. It is a continuation of religion by other means. Therefore, Naranjayan also agrees that it wasn't the sudden enlightenment that brought rationality into the world and killed religion. No, it was a gradual process that derived from religion itself, and secularization is a continuation of religion, simply without the supernatural components. In today's world, it is the government institutions, court system, jurisdiction, hospitals, social security system, and so on that substitute many functions that were historically attributed to religion. According to Naranjayan, this is the main reason why religion is dying out in the first world countries with strong economy and level of social security, while in the third world countries where people are struggling for survival, religion is flourishing. And now, after mentioning all this, I want us to get back to Inglehart's chapter 8, which is called What Replaces Religion. To imagine what is replacing religion, Inglehart suggests to examine what is emerging in the countries that have moved farthest along the path from religion to individual choice norms. Those are countries with a high standard of living. After all, history has shown that societies that seem to be doing well are most likely to be imitated. Based on decades of research, Inglehart believes such countries include Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, and the Netherlands. For many decades, they were and remain leaders of cultural change. He calls them Nordic countries. In the section The Americanization of the World, or the Nordicization of the world, he argues that in the future many countries will try to imitate not the American model, but the Nordic model. But if so, what will this mean for religion? Inglehart provides statistical data and claims that while there has been an erosion of traditional religious morality in the Nordic countries, the emerging culture has a clear morality of its own. Nordic countries, despite their declining emphasis on religion, are characterized by high level of interpersonal trust, tolerance, honesty, social solidarity, gender equality, and commitment to democratic norms. They now rank among the world's healthiest, best educated, and most prosperous countries. Moreover, the Nordic countries have some of the least corrupt government in the world. They also practice Christian charity, spending a larger share of their national income on foreign aid than most other countries, and they obey the fifth commandment, having exceptionally low murder rates. In the ranking of democracy, they occupy the highest positions, and also considered to be the happiest, safest, and most egalitarian societies. That is, the gap between the rich and poor is almost non-existent. And this is what most people need to be happy. The sense of justice, when you understand that almost everyone around you gets about the same as you do. Anyway, I won't go into all details, but Inglehart clearly wants to demonstrate that so far the Nordic countries are the best model to be copied. And because they are also the least religious countries, he believes that religiosity will decline. Over time, in the third world countries, life will improve, income will grow, women's rights will be more respected, women will receive a better education and focus on a career. They will occupy a relatively large portion of leadership position, and this will eventually affect their level of religiosity and the number of children they have. For more on such a theory, please see Callum Brown's book, The Death of Christian Britain. Brown challenges the generally held view that secularization in Great Britain was a long and gradual process. According to Brown, a sudden decline of religion started in the 1960s. Women have always been the majority participants in the UK Protestantism. But for Brown, the gendering of parenthood and religion was overturned by the 1960s revolution. Parental roles start shifting, women began focusing more on education and career. As a result, late marriages, less children, and other related reasons dramatically influenced the decline in Christianity. But let us conclude on Inglehart and then turn to criticism of his ideas. He admits that the accelerated recent decline of religion can't be attributed to any one cause. We will probably be unraveling its origins for some time. But the reversal of the causal flow between religion and pro-fertility norms seems to be a particularly pervasive and widely underestimated influence. For example, Inglehart believes that immigration, especially to Europe, brings a lot of uncertainty, and therefore it is difficult to predict how things will unfold. He also acknowledges that authoritarian regimes thrive in many parts of the globe, and with them racism, sexism, homophobia often thrive, and it set the base for religious fundamentalism. That is, there is no guarantee that democratic values will keep prevailing. In authoritarian societies, the economy works on the principle the winner takes it all. And in such countries, economic inequality is growing while existential security is declining, which means religion can flourish. All these are just educated guesses of a well-respected expert. But of course it's up to you to trust Inglehart or not. My responsibility was to convey to you his theses. So now I propose to discuss what the critics say. First, any global theory should always be viewed with caution. Our world is very complex, and the phenomenon of religion is extremely complex. There are lots of factors on which it depends, and if someone claims to know the big picture or to be able to forecast and highlight some universal patterns, then it is better to be very careful with conclusions. We see that in Inglehart's case, he relies more on quantitative data and on a functional rather than phenomenological approach to religion, or ethic rather than emic approach. That is, he looks at the aquarium from the outside, and studying everything about it from the outside describes the world inside the aquarium. At the same time, he almost doesn't immerse himself in it and does not particularly try to understand the thoughts of its inhabitants and their motivation for certain actions. I'm not saying that he completely ignores phenomenology, but he clearly does not have deep qualitative data. Therefore, it is not surprising that the data on which Inglehart bases his conclusion are questionable for some experts, especially in humanities. It is also important to acknowledge your cultural limitations. Where is the guarantee that one will not transfer their prejudices into their research? After all, the way one looks at the world can be very different from how people of different race, nationality, gender, social status, and level of education look at the world, and maybe the reason why one abandoned religion may be irrelevant to others. Therefore, it is not surprising that there are those who remind Inglehart that there is a difference between covariance and causality. His claims may rely on the assumption that religion equals Christianity, while Christianity equals conservative. But what about religious people that are not monotheist and that are liberal, pro-choice, or feminist Christians? Another issue that Inglehart could cover more thoroughly is the problem of definition of religion in relation to ideology. If we draw a parallel between religion and ideology, is secularization taking place in this direction? Do people become less fanatical about all sorts of secular ideologies and about their blind commitment to secular leaders? Among researchers of religion, there are many who believe that religion has shifted but not disappeared. Yes, Christianity in Europe may be dying out, but this does not mean that people have become materialist. They may vocally criticize Christianity for all its mistakes, but then discuss how their amulet has healed or protected them, how they saw a spirit of their deceased ancestor in a dream, or they may fanatically believe everything that their political leader says, and are willing to give their lives for those ideas. Another issue is the religious individualization thesis. It argues that modernization will change only the social forms of religion. People may stop attending religious institutions, but they may practice their faith individually. A good example is Estonia. Yes, there are many absolute materialists there, but there are also many of those who, after abandoning Christianity, switch to believing in the supernatural power of nature, reincarnation, and so on. So such researchers can accuse Inglehart of paying too much attention to Christian culture and Europe. He allegedly based his conclusion mostly on changes in the very traditional European Christian culture. But the world is diverse. For example, you can look at criticism from Talal Asad or Saba Mahmoud, who points that in some non-European cultures, it is impossible to place a culture and religion into two different baskets. They are simply indivisible. So what is religion then? And yet it is worth noting that Ronald Inglehart is quite an experienced researcher. and he is aware of all such criticism. He understands the shortcomings of the quantitative method, he addresses the religious individualization thesis or religious market theory, he is careful with the definition of religion, and he considers the importance of economic stability and the importance of psychological emotional comfort. That is the approaches of Marx and Freud. And despite bold claims, he leaves room for doubt and doesn't stubbornly say that everything is predestined. No, he is flexible. The influence of religion can rise and fall depending on the situation and the level of security in a given society, and according to him, secularization is not a unidirectional phenomenon. Also take into account that Inglehart is not a scholar of religion. He is not an ethnographer that does in-depth interviews with believers. Religion is a complex phenomenon, and it is studied from different angles by sociologists, anthropologists, psychologists, economists, religious scholars, historians, philosophers, biologists, and so on. And all studies of this kind have their strengths and weaknesses. Relying on a different methodology and a different set of data, they can complement each other. While a sociologist or economist can point to one dimension of religion, an anthropologist or a religious scholar could emphasize some other aspects of religion, and they could all be right at the same time. Therefore, when we read Inglehart, yes, his view, as of any other researcher, may be limited to his cultural and historical background. He may have personal biases, and many of his predictions may not come true, and yet this is the opinion of a highly qualified and respected expert. He shares the result of arguably the largest research ever conducted on religion. So even if you don't agree with his interpretation, it is important to learn about that. Thank you for listening to the end. I will be glad to hear your comments below. Do you agree with Inglehart or not? And of course, thank you for your likes and subscription.